Welcome to the Lazy Girl's Guide to Podcasting. If you want effective and actionable tips to simplify the overwhelm of launching and managing your podcast, then this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Verity Songon, podcast manager, launch strategist, and host of a Top 100 podcast. I'm really excited to have you here, so without further ado, let's dive into the episode. Hello there and welcome back to the Lazy Girl's Guide to Podcasting. We are in episode 3, and in this episode we are going to be slightly controversial. I realise it's only episode 3, you're probably thinking, Verity, it's not time to be controversial just yet, but we are going to be slightly controversial and discuss why you should not be using Zoom to record your podcast episodes. Some of you are probably already thinking, oh my gosh, but I love Zoom. I like Zoom as well. It's a conferencing platform though. It is not designed for recording podcasts and distributing that audio for podcasts. So we need to take it back a little bit and consider what Zoom actually is. Now, Zoom is a conferencing platform, as I said, and Zoom is absolutely amazing. It really came into its own during COVID. You remember that with lockdown and, people needing to communicate, and Zoom was a massive go-to. And don't get me wrong, in 2020, I was one of those people, as I'm sure a lot of people were, who were kicking themselves that they hadn't taken out shares in Zoom at the end of 2019. But kind of that, Zoom is a conferencing platform. So yes, you can record your meetings on it, you can record the audio, and then at the end what you can do is get an audio track and also the video track from your Zoom recording, which a lot of people love. It is fantastic, don't get me wrong. However, as I've said a few times already, Zoom is a conferencing platform. It was not set up with the intention of recording and hosting podcasts on it and recording podcasts and giving you the recording to the same standard as something which has already been set up, as a platform that has been set up specifically for that need and sharing of the audio afterwards. So you're probably asking, well, Verity, what am I supposed to use instead of Zoom? But before we do, I'm just going to give you another example as to why Zoom might not be the best choice for you. And that is because at the time of recording this episode, they have reinstigated their 40-minute limit. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, but Verity, I only want my podcast episodes to be 20 to 30 minutes long, and that's fine. However, when you get on a call to interview somebody, you're not necessarily going to be starting straight away with the first question. And equally, you're not going to be finishing the interview and then chucking somebody off. You're probably going to want a little bit, even just 5 minutes of conversation at the beginning, and also a little wrap up at the end, just to see how it went and give them a little exchange of dialogue. Because you're interacting with a human, you want to be able to say thank you off the recording as well. And because of that, even if you're recording for 30 minutes, 5 minutes at the beginning, 5 minutes at the end, you've already pushed your 40-minute limit there. So I do not recommend Zoom for both because of the audio quality that you get at the end, but also because if you're using the free plan, you just don't get the time limit or the time amount that you really, really need there. Instead, there are loads and loads of different out there that you can use for recording remote interviews. The one that I suggest is Zencastr. I will leave the link for that in the show notes below. Now, Zencastr is completely free. This is not an affiliate link. I do not get anything out of recommending Zencastr to you other than the knowledge that I am hopefully helping somebody improve the audio quality of their podcast going forward. Now, Zencastr is absolutely amazing. It is created from the point of view of recording a podcast and actually sharing the audio afterwards at podcast quality. The other thing that it does is it also records the video for you. But the most brilliant thing that I find about Zencastr is that when you download your interview at the end, it actually gives you 2 audio tracks, or 3, it gives you an audio track per person who is talking in the interview. So normally if you're just doing, you're interviewing one other person, you'll get 2 tracks, one for you as the host and also 1 track for the interviewee. But if you're interviewing multiple people, then you'll have more tracks. Now, you might be wondering why this is useful, but it's when it comes to editing, it is so much easier to edit when you've got multiple tracks. And believe me, I promise you, it is not as complicated as it sounds, but it is great being able to have those multiple tracks, because then say the dog walks in for the interviewees, when they're silent but you're talking, it's easier to edit that out than it is on Zoom where you're trying to edit your own background noise. In fact, it's almost nigh impossible unless you're very, very good at editing. But as I said, from a startup point of view, it's so much easier to just use something like Zencaster. You get 2 different tracks, and then editing those tracks makes it so much easier. Now, if you're thinking, but Verity, how do I actually use Zencaster? If you go to my website, veritysongon.com, and you click on courses, and then you click on the Confident Podcaster, in my Confident Podcaster course, I have got tech tutorials helping you set up and run your own podcast, but there are tech tutorials in there. And one of the ones that we cover is how to use Zencaster. And then I show you how to edit 2 tracks or multiple tracks from using Zencaster to record your interviews as well. But as I said, the premise of this is to encourage you to not just gravitate towards Zoom because it is just there, because as I said, it does not produce and provide you with the audio quality that you need for podcasting long term. Now, as I said, fundamentally, there is nothing wrong with it. If you're using it, fine. If you're a diehard Zoom fan, absolutely fine. However, I do feel that the more that you get into your podcasting, the more you get into your interviews and also editing, you will start finding that Zoom does start lacking. It really, really does. And what you will start noticing as well is the more that you podcast and the more that you listen to other podcasts, you will start noticing the quality. You start noticing basically when people are using Zoom and when they're using something which is actually designed for podcast recording, you can start hearing those differences. So I hope you found this episode useful. Check out Zencaster. As I said, it's actually got 2 free plans, which is amazing. I've never heard of anything having 2 free plans before, but it's got 2 free plans. So check that out in the show links below, and I will see you in episode 4.